Um, Hi everyone, I'm Alana, your friendly neighbourhood archaeologist. Just as a quick question, how many people are familiar with archaeology in New Zealand? Oh, there's not many hands at all. That's cool, you're about to learn some stuff. I've got lots and lots of pictures in here that I'm going to talk to, so hopefully you guys enjoy the journey that I'm going to take you on. This one that I've got right here, that's me and my friend Rebecca. That's a half section of a beautiful rubbish pit. It doesn't sound very glamorous, but rubbish pits are one of our favourite types of archaeological features because they are jam-packed full of stuff that can tell us stuff about the people who lived on the site back in the day. I actually have two wee artefacts up the front here that if you want to come have a look and handle them later, definitely come up, maybe after we do questions and we do another wee interval. Yeah, cool. It's always better when you can actually hold the stuff and look at it. Cool. A good starting point. What is archaeology? I have literally had this happen to me before when I enter things online. I promise it is a valid job, I do get paid. It's not dinosaurs. I don't even have a favourite dinosaur, sorry to disappoint. Most people will think of Indiana Jones and Lara Croft. I love both of those guys, but I am yet to run through a temple or go through booby traps or punch a Nazi in the face. There's, I guess, still time for that last one. Hopefully not, we don't condone violence. But basically, archaeology is the study of people through their material culture. So we study people through their stuff. We're anthropologists, so our cousin, I guess, topics or studies can be your sociocultural anthropologists who study ideas, your biological anthropologists who study human remains, and linguists who study language and spoken culture. So that's kind of where we fit in. We can use our methodologies to study any time period, any physical thing. So if you said, Alana, I want you to go study stuff from the 2010s, I wouldn't enjoy it, but I could do it. I definitely prefer being in the 19th century, which is where most of our stuff relates to. But in New Zealand, we work to the Heritage New Zealand Pouhere Taonga Act of 2014, which legally classifies anything that relates to people that dates to pre-1900 as archaeology. So I've got some examples of what that looks like. Pointing that way. I went too far. Go back. Cool. So we kind of categorise archaeology in New Zealand into two main groups. We have Indigenous archaeology or Māori archaeology, and then your post-contact historic archaeology. There is a bit of a little overlap in the middle where you've got your mission stations and early settlers and whaling stations and trading posts and stuff like that, but for the most part we kind of are in one of those two camps. So what I've got behind me here is a beautiful example of a pā site. This is Tani Whapā up in Waikato. Those are beautiful Kerma pits cascading down the side. Very, very cool. Our local pā sites aren't as intense as that. They're still very, very cool, but they just don't show necessarily as well in aerials. Any ideas on who that is? That's a moa bone that came out underneath Redcliffe School. So that's tibiotarsus? No, a tarsometatarsus. Yeah, tarsometatarsus, the lower leg bone of a moa. So that's pretty chunky. Moa bones make really good material for making stone tools. Every now and then you get an archaeological site where moa have already gone extinct and Māori people have come along, found another archaeological site, dug up some moa bone and reused it. So it's almost a double archaeology sort of situation. Very cool. This is a little stone hearth, so you're burning some stuff, it's a little bit more formal. This is a very nice gridded out archaeological excavation. This is time team worthy stuff, very beautiful. That's a big cooking area, so hangi pits and ovens and stuff. And if anyone's been to Kaikoura and you know where Nin's bin is, yeah, that's under the safe stopping area right there. And this last thing here, it might not look like much, but that colour change in that soil and all that burning, that's a cultural layer. So we've got mud snails all through there that would have been food refuse from back in the day. So that's a pretty quick overview of what we look at. In terms of artefacts, here's a pretty quick look at what we get. This one down here that kind of looks like a hot cross bun almost, that's a little sinker, so for your fishing nets and stuff, they're real cool. This is a moa bone fish hook up here. This is a Pounamu ads that came out from underneath State Highway 1, about 400 mil deep. It's very shallow, it's right under your feet or under your car. Here's a bunch of stone tools, lovely wee fish hook, some needles, a pendant, a little awl for like stabbing things and stuff, another fish hook, and a lovely piece of obsidian, which is volcanic glass. Obsidian, it like flakes really well. I really like playing around with it, and it only comes from the North Island. So if we find it down south, we know that there's been some sort of trade network going on. You've got social relationships, people are moving around, very cool stuff. In terms of historic archaeology, typically in Christchurch we deal a lot with pre-1900 buildings, such as this one up the top here that was on Worcester Street. It can include bridges, like this old rail bridge here, and wells. This came out from under the new Court Theatre building and dates to like the 1850s, so right when European settlers were turning up. I made them save the bricks to use for something later on. They were into it, don't worry, I didn't like force them at gunpoint or anything. Although maybe I could. This one down here, does anyone live in Littleton? No one from Littleton? Oh, well, this is a brick barrel drain. There's like 6 main ones through Littleton, and every time we do work on a Littleton brick barrel drain, one of the local residents will come out and tell me stories about how they used to climb up them when they were kids, and I'm like, oh, you're mad? They're only about 1 metre tall in diameter. I couldn't think of anything worse. And industrial remains as well is like another thing that we deal with a lot. So that's a wee mining adit over on the west coast, and that is the site of the first... it's a power station, but it was in Reefton, so it was the first place to have publicly available electricity and streetlights back in 1888. Very cool. I'm from the coast, so had to throw something in there. In terms of historic artefacts, most people would recognise historic archaeology because glass bottles kind of look pretty similar. We still use plates, they just look a little bit different decoration-wise. We do get a lot of things like doll's heads. They're a little bit creepy, and usually they look like they're well over it, which I always find really funny. But they're a really good example and like a good expression of children in the archaeological record, because they can be quite hard to pick up sometimes. So that's a very quick overview of what we would typically look like. This is what my job looks like day to day. So sometimes we're in asbestos suits. Archaeologists hate asbestos. They're like our number one enemy. I hate wearing those things, and I can totally speak on behalf of the office. No one likes being in an asbestos suit or respirator, but for the good of the archaeology, we will wear them and we will persevere. This is me 7 metres below road level in Littleton, looking at one of those silly brick barrel drains that we still have. Sorting midden, digging up hungy pits, recording stuff out at Littleton Port, which is always really fun because they're all really nice out there. And there's that yellow well again. So a work day can look totally different depending on the day of the week. And of course, this is just the field work. Sometimes I'm totally chained to a desk working through a million reports or assessments as well, but they don't make good photos, so I left them out. Right, so back to our favourite archaeological feature, rubbish pits. It is just a bunch of old rubbish, but hopefully with these next 3 examples, I can convince you that it is good rubbish that tells us information about people that we wouldn't necessarily get through the historic record, and about people that don't really get mentioned otherwise. A lot of what we do is looking into the everyday person who may have kind of otherwise been forgotten. Like, everyone knows Kate Shepherd, but you may not know Cabbage Wilson, who's one of the people that always pops up in the historical record. But yeah, this is generally what our rubbish pits look like. This one's actually full of shoes. This one's been dug out because someone, I guess, started cleaning up, then decided they couldn't be bothered and left the rest of it and backfilled part of it. This one's actually a privy pit, so that's an old outhouse. You can tell by the way the fill is. And this one's actually 2, cut into each other. So we love digging them because they have great information, and fortunately in Christchurch we've got really nice silt, so the ground's really soft. If you go to our friends down in Dunedin, it's a little bit harder to dig through, so we brag about that to them quite a bit. Anyway, here's our first example. So we did a really, really big project back in 2022 as part of the bulk excavation for the new Court Theatre building, and we found just like a mountain of beautiful 1850s, 1860s through to the 1900s archaeology, all relating to early like commercial shops and one residence that was on the site. One of the main artifacts we found was the smoking pipe. I actually have it up here, so if you want to have a closer look later, come up and see me. Yes, if you are thinking, is that a dead baby on the side of that? It is. Is that a topless lady getting slashed by a bloke? It is. It's very grim. Usually when we dig up smoking pipes, there'll be something a little bit fun, like a claw of an eagle or a mermaid. So when we first saw this, I was like, cool, a mermaid. And then we washed it and we were like, oh, that's not very nice. So we did a little bit of research into it. And on the side, it might be a little bit hard to see, but over here it says Delhi, and over here it says Nana Sahib. So this piece relates to the 1857 Indian Mutiny, which didn't go very well. We don't need to dwell into the history, but look it up later if you want. So it's a piece commemorating those events, and it was made by a French pipe manufacturer. So we've got an Indian event, a French pipe manufacturer, and New Zealand all the way down here. So this one little piece kind of connects us to this big international web of manufacturers and social political events, right? So sometimes we can see New Zealand, especially during that early period, as this little guy way off there, the hellhole of the Pacific for a wee bit we were called. We got better. But it kind of puts us in like a bigger setting than what you would otherwise think. And relationships with India, I think, like there are little kind of tidbits everywhere. Like, does anyone live in Kashmir? Does anyone collect that that relates to India? Because John Cracroft Wilson, who settled in that area, he was in all of the British troops and stuff over there, and that's also where we get Cracroft, so he's kind of a big deal for a wee bit. But the pipe itself is a really good example of a very, very intricate piece. Like if you were running around with this, you've got cash, like this is bougie stuff. We can tell, like it would have had gilt and like little decorations and paint and all sorts. We can tell that it was never smoked because the inside of the smoking bowl is not blackened, which means that it's broken stock. So we don't know whether it's broken because it just didn't sell because people were like, ooh, gross, I don't want to walk around with that. Or if it was too expensive, or if it simply fell off a shelf. But like that's one artifact of literal thousands that came out of the site that relates to one specific business and links to all sorts of different things going on in the world. So very interesting. The next one. This is a pit full of glass. Wow. Pits full of glass turn up a lot, and I hate excavating them because you always rip your glove and there's always sharp stuff everywhere. But this one, very good information. These funky bottles, has anyone seen these before? So, I've got one here. These are called torpedo bottles, and they're old school fizzy drink bottles. They're like, they don't have a flat bottom so that they stay stored sideways, because with the carbonation in the bottle, if the cork dries out, it just like shoots off the end, and then all your product's gone, so it's a waste of time. So you get them stored like this. They're pretty funky. They're very solid, so like if you come up and grab them, you're not going to break it. They last for a reason. But anyway, we found this across the road from Little High Eatery. So Joseph Milsom set up Christchurch's second aerated water factory there back in 1860. The first one, I think, popped up in 1859 and was Thomas Rain. Yes, Lydia's saying yes. She's our lovely historian. So Christchurch actually had, still has, a very good access to beautiful drinking water, and early settlers could like tap into that pretty quickly on. And Christchurch eventually became the number one, or had the most aerated water factories across all of New Zealand at one point. We're just mad for fizzy drink. But back in the day, it was a little bit more medicinal as well. Like you drink your ginger beers because you've got an upset tummy, or your tonics and your mineral waters because you're a healthy gal. But anyway, so this is right across the road from Little High Eatery. He set up his factory there, and one of the pits we found was this one. This one down here, these are all Schweppes bottles, so that's kind of nice, still good. Obviously got a good business brand going on there, they've lasted through the ages. And this pretty blue one up here is from New South Wales. And what we found in this pit was oodles of different brands from just the UK and Australia, which is really weird because he's set up his own business, right? So one of two things is happening here. One, he's using other people's bottles because in New Zealand, we didn't have glass manufacture until the 1920s, which is, by all things, pretty quite late. So you had to put in an order for the bottles with your embossing on, and then they'd come out over a little bit later. In the meantime, you'd use whatever you could get your hands on. So there were people roaming around selling, like, I guess, excess bottles. They've drunk a whole bunch on their ship on the way over. They'll sell it to anyone who will buy it, whack a paper label over the top, you're good to go. The other thing that we think is going on here is he's sampling the market. He's settling down, he's setting up his business, and he's like, sweet, I'm going to see what Schweppes tastes like. I'll see what Street & Co tastes like. What do I want my brand to be? How do I want my things to taste? So even though it's just a pit full of glass, you can see business ideas and like actual choices that a person's making, which is pretty cool that we can do that, because not every pit full of glass is that interesting. I can promise you that. Okay, last example, and then I'll stop chewing your ear off. Okay, this is from Christ's College, and I cannot stress enough how much I love looking at dirt. Look at all of these layers. I'll talk you through what's going on. You've got your underlying natural stuff here. This ugly brown horizon is our archaeology. Well, I suppose technically everything above it is as well, but this is the interesting stuff. This is all full of rubbish and all the stuff that you see down here. And then they covered it, probably because it would have stunk a wee bit, and then they built up the bun so it looked lovely and pretty. What we can see here is a bunch of school-related artefacts. So you've got your penny ink bottles, and you've got little ink wells. There were all sorts of like little metal apparatus that probably related to like teaching equipment and stuff in there as well. But because you've got people living at Christ's College in those boarding houses, particularly back in the day, like I think they were there from like 1853. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, we'll go with 1853. Early anyway. You've got people living in boarding houses. Good to see they're brushing their teeth. They've got toothpaste. There's lots of other ones that popped out. This one up here is a cologne jar, so we know that they've got good teeth. They smell pretty okay, maybe for the most part. Not too bad. You've also got your bottles popping up. This one may look like not a lot, but it's really, really weird. When we pulled it out, we were like, ooh, we haven't seen many of those. And if anyone remembers like the rum bottles that they drink in Pirates of the Caribbean that are a little bit more like bulbous, they're called like Dutch onion bottles. It's not quite that, but it's definitely like maybe a descendant, so it's somewhere a little bit earlier. This is definitely like mid-19th century rather than late 19th century, so a little bit odd. But the most interesting thing, which might not look like the most interesting thing, is this guy up here. And it'll probably be a bit hard to read what it actually has on the side of it from where you guys are sitting. But inscribed near the rim, it says A1 Hotel. Can you guys figure out what's going on here? How many of you have nicked a bottle or a glass from a pub? Because this is a school site. It's not the A1 Hotel site. The A1 Hotel site's over on Manchester Street. I looked it up. So someone's gone to the pub and bloody well stolen this. And it's ended up in a hole in the ground, and I've gone and found it. I did check. By 1880s, that's when the pub was operating, and back then you could go to the pub when you were 16, so there's no, well, there probably was shenanigans going on, but maybe they were a bit okay. So here's another example of how ideas change, technologies change, but for the most part, people don't. And there's something really nice about that. We definitely see the same trends and the same decisions and the same behaviours time and time again. People are clever, but we're also kind of simple. Yeah, so those are my examples. I could honestly spend hours talking about all the stuff that I've shown you, but I do not have hours. So if you want to know more, if you want to really nerd out, it is actually Archaeology Week this week, and there's a bunch of events on, and there's a free one on this weekend at ChCh's House if you want to go and talk to some archaeologists and look at more cool stuff. We also have a blog my workplace puts together. We've been really slack the last year. We've not put anything up. Honestly, it's so bad. But if you want to get into like some really weird specific topics, like that's the place you want to go check out. Heritage New Zealand also have a bunch of podcasts. The New Zealand Archaeology Association have tons of events and resources. And if you want to really get nitty-gritty and specific, Heritage New Zealand actually have an online digital library, so you can totally like look up an address or a site type or an artifact type, and all of the stuff that is like publicly available will pop up. So please go have a field day, and hopefully you've enjoyed my talk. And yeah, if you've got any questions, let me know.
It was awesome, thank you. I have a question. How do you decide where to dig?
Oh, that's a good question. I should have explained that. So in New Zealand, unless you're doing like a research dig, in which case you've got an archaeologist who's like, that looks interesting, I want to go do that, like all your university kind of stuff. It's kind of like a very consenting user pays sort of situation. So if you, for example, if you owned this property and you were like, I want to totally redevelop it, bulk it out, you will get, usually like in your consenting process, they'll say, have you considered archaeology? And most people will be like, don't need to worry about that. But you do, I promise you do. Then that usually triggers what we would call an archaeological appraisal or assessment, and basically it comes, someone will phone us and be like, hey, I'm doing this project, can you please check if there's any archaeological risk? And we'll say yes or no, and if it is a yes, then we need to do all the paperwork to get an archaeological authority from Heritage New Zealand, which is pretty much just the consent that says, yep, you can do your project as long as you do X, Y, Z, and then we go from there. Yeah. The paperwork side is not as interesting, so I usually like focus on the fun, pretty pictures. Yeah.
Thanks for the talk. I'm just curious, the stuff you dig up, how do you know how old it is?
It depends on the stuff. So you get really, really good at knowing weird artifact types, and we have a specialist in our office who's like, she is just so in tune with 19th century material culture. Like, she can look at a pattern on a ceramic plate and be like, they didn't want to see that by the 1860s, it's only pre-1860. We can look at manufacturers if they've got manufacturer marks, but general like stylistic choices within the artifacts themselves. Sometimes the location of the archaeology can tell us. So if you've got a rubbish pit that is under a building, but you know that the building was built in 1899, the rubbish pit had to be there before 1899. So you can use stuff like that to kind of inform as well. In Christchurch, we're really lucky. We've got 2 historic maps that have all the building footprints in 1862 and 1877. So we use those all the time to do that sort of thing. Yeah.
Hi, Alana. Excellent presentation. My question is about the candy cane sticks that you had at every dig.
Our stripy sticks.
Do you have a lot of those? Like, do you know in advance like how big the dig is going to be, and do you have to bring bucket loads of them to map out the whole thing? Is it for measuring the size of it?
So the stripy sticks are stadia rods, and they're a metre. So the intervals are 100 mils, and they're just for photos so that we know how big or how thick things are. Mine, which are the ones that you saw in the photos, are spray-painted garden stakes from Nite ChCh, because I'm not paying $80 to get them imported from the UK. You can get really, really nice ones, but they're very expensive. So everyone's kind of got their own set, and we always go with red and white. I'm not sure why. Everyone just did that, so maybe it's like a photo colour thing, and I'm just not clever enough to know why. But yeah, they're just photo scales. If you ever see someone wandering around with one, though, like, you know that you've got an archaeologist wandering around in the wild or on your site, though. People have flagged me down because they've seen me with them. Yeah.
So what if you got something really, really fancy? Like some sort of, I don't know, a diamond ring or whatever. Who does it belong to?
Oh, that's another good question. So if you excavate historic materials, it belongs to the landowner. So, for example, these ones, because they came out at the Court Theatre site, technically they belong to CCC, but they'll probably be like, man, we don't want them, so we'll try to give them to a museum or we'll just keep them in storage. If it is Māori archaeological material, it becomes, I think prima facie is the right word, but it goes to the Crown until the appropriate runanga or local iwi can be decided. Super easy in the South Island because you're like, sweet, Ngāi Tahu, it's all yours. Up north, not so simple, and it's a whole process. So yeah, it really depends on where you are in the country as to how quickly that kind of happens. Yeah.
What if it is a site? What if it's not objects? What if it's an actual site? So, can you use the property?
I didn't hear the last bit, sorry.
So it goes back to the iwi, or if it is a property.
Just the stuff that comes out. If you've got if you have a really important cultural site on your property, you're not allowed to do anything to it. It is illegal to rip a bulldozer through it or something like that. I'm not saying that people don't. People definitely do. Please don't do that. But yeah, you do have legal parameters that you're meant to work within. And archaeological sites aren't just artefacts. They can be landscapes, and they can be things like man-made lakes or water races or big midden exposures and stuff like that as well. So yeah, not always about artefacts. They're just the easiest thing to do show and tell with. Yeah.
Awesome. Let's give Alana another round of applause. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.